like this, we have the infrastructure in place that we can withstand this. With the retrofitting and the science that goes behind needing to fortify our buildings, our utilities and refineries and whatnot, we've done a pretty good job.
Yeah, that's certainly good news tonight. And again, just another reminder for all of us to be ready for the quote-unquote big one. Just to have enough water supply, food, flashlights, batteries, things that you might think you need for days on end, because you never know what's going to happen, how strong an earthquake can be, when it's going to hit, where it's going to hit, and if you're at home, you certainly want to be ready for that. What
was the one thing that Dr. Jones says? Make sure you have a lot of water. Make sure you have a lot of water. Let's go to Lula Davis Holmes, who is the mayor of Carson, who is going to join us now. Lula Davis Jones, thank you so much for joining us. You are the mayor of Carson, where this epicenter was for the earthquake. Give us a report.
Well, the report is that everything is well in the city of Carson. We just had a 4.7 earthquake, but we've deployed all of our staff. Our EOC is up and operating. I've been in constant contact with the sheriff department and all of the staff and the water department to make sure that everything in our city is safe and our residents are safe. So thank God that it was not any serious damage, and we will be assessing that, and they will be reporting back to me. Unfortunately, I'm out of the city of Carson at the moment. I had to attend a conference. So I've been in constant contact with our city manager, Sharon Landers, and our Captain Jones, and various leaders in the city to make sure that our city is safe and that we don't have any major damage. I've also been on the line with Alan Caldwell, who's the government affairs person for Marathon, and he has assured me that it was just a flare-up. There's nothing to be alarmed about. So right now, we have good reports coming in, and I'm just happy to say that nothing major happened in our great city.
That is so good to hear. And have you heard from any of your constituents or maybe family members that are there in Carson about what they felt?
They felt a big jolt, and it frightened the dogs. My daughter was alarmed. I had some damage, breaking items, pictures fell off the shelf in my home, but nothing major, nothing major. So I did talk to my son, and I have a few constituents that have called me and said that everything is good. Councilman Joe Busciani called to check to make sure everything was safe, because he's close to the area also. So surrounding areas in the city of Carson is fine at the moment.
Well, that's really great that you have that pipeline. Explain that, will you, Mayor, to our viewers about just how when something like this happens, how the people we're talking about with your city that serve these people, this is obviously in Carson, but people across the Southland can relate to how something like this puts into action government officials, city leaders to communicate with fire and police and the sheriff's department to assess the possible damages out there. Tell us about the pipeline of information that you have.
The pipeline of information, I'm just pleased to say we activated our EOC center immediately. They contact us immediately. So that is the emergency response team that we have in place, and it's doing fine. We have a strong pipeline with the sheriff, fire, water, and our city manager and city staff, and the EOC team is operating at a 1/3 capacity right now, just to make sure. So when anything like this happens in the city of Carson, everyone is on board. And even though I'm in Palm Springs, I got the message as soon as it happened. My city manager was in contact, and we just work as a team, as a family. And my surrounding cities have called to make sure, from Gardena to San Pedro, and to make sure that everything is okay in the city of Carson. So it's a network.
Yeah, sure.
And it's activated immediately.
Well, Mayor, you've lived here in Southern California, and I'm sure you felt bigger earthquakes than this 4.3 magnitude in your city today. Tell us about what you believe, and how ready do you believe Southern Californians are really for the big one?
Well, there's been a lot of retrofitting going on of our buildings and things, and matter of fact, we're just upgrading our EOC center. And that's a message that we send out all the time, that you have to be ready for the big one, because you don't know when it's going to happen. Make sure that our residents have lots of water in their house. And then we also go and check on our seniors, because they're the most vulnerable ones. And we have block captains at many of our blocks that they check on the residents. So there's a team effort to make sure that everyone, your neighbors are correct, are protected, and that they're okay. So we encourage our residents to check on everyone that's on your block. We call them our block captains.
Yeah,
And it's when something like this happens, they have a list, a lot of our streets, and the ones that don't, we're trying to get them. So it's important for us to check on all of the residents on your block. And because I tell them all the time, our block captain are the eyes and ears of this community, and we are one family. So we need to make sure that all of our family members are safe and protected and they have what they need. So those are other areas that we have implemented in the city of Carson. And, you just check on everyone that's around you and make sure they're safe.
So, Mayor, I just have one real quick question. We know there are 2 refineries in Carson, Marathon. What's the other one? I know that everything's fine there, but what is the other refinery?
Phillips 66 just received a call from them. They're okay also.
Okay.
Ken Dami called and said everything is fine.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Mayor. Thank you, and best of luck to you and your community. And we really appreciate your time here on KCAL 9. Thank you.
Thank you so much for reaching out.
All right, we're joined now by Caltech seismologist Dr. Jen Andrews. Can you hear us, Dr. Andrews?
I can, yeah. Can you hear me fine?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. Tell us about this 4.3 quake out of Carson.
Yeah, so nothing unexpected from our point of view with this 4.3 earthquake. It was moderately deep, around 7.5 miles. Near the Newport-Inglewood fault zone, but not associated right now with any particular strand of that. But we do have a lot of faults in this area, so not unexpected. Strike-slip faults are very consistent with the other earthquakes that we see in our area. So nothing too unexpected, but obviously people did still feel a strong jolt with this one.
So I heard that this, so you mentioned a strike-slip fault. Is this was occurred west of any sort of fault that you follow? Or, I mean, all these faults have been named. Which ones did this occur near?
So yeah, this is near the Newport-Inglewood fault zone, which is quite a long fault zone that extends through the LA basin and offshore. So the same fault zone was responsible for the 1933 Long Beach earthquake. So it has been an active fault, in Los Angeles.
That's interesting. So when you talk about the Newport-Inglewood fault zone, do you expect something like this to happen with a 4.3? It's really something that you expect that would occur. It's nothing that would raise any alarms?
Exactly, yeah. And we've seen quite a significant number of events of a similar magnitude in our catalogue. So about 40 events in the last century that we have recordings for of about a magnitude 4. We've seen magnitude 5s as well. As you say, yeah, lots of faults like this just here in the LA basin. So nothing unexpected from our point of view. But of course, we do keep monitoring. We're still looking for aftershocks, and those may be expected.
Well, Dr. Andrews, I know a lot of people are wondering tonight, was this a foreshock to a bigger one?
And we can never know that. Unfortunately, there is a small chance with Southern California that this was a foreshock, but the most likely scenario is that this is the biggest earthquake we'll have. There'll be a few small aftershocks in the next few days. Likely most of those won't be felt. We'll just pick them up on our instruments. So while people should be prepared, they certainly shouldn't be, overly anxious or worried.
So tell me a little bit more. A strike-slip fault means what? And there's a number of different faults out there. You don't have to go through all of them, but tell us a little bit more about this particular one. What does a strike-slip fault mean? Oh, we might have lost. Oh, we got Dave Avila back on the phone. We might have lost the doctor there, but let's go to Dave. Dave, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us here on KCAL 9. What's up with you? Tell us where you were at the time that this occurred. Did you feel it?
Hello, Jeff. Hello, Susie. Yeah, I'm way out in the north end of Ontario, so I didn't feel a thing, but I just heard it up on the news. But, just one thing about LAPD Air Support Division. I know we were talking about the fire department, and of course they go up. But every LAPD helicopter has a book that's an ADAP book. That's the acronym for Airborne Damage Assessment Program. And usually we have 3 ships up, the Valley, Mid-City, and South Central. And they'll have an assigned area. And what they do is that they go around, and of course, one of the first things they check is the downtown buildings. The Mid-City would check all the downtown, see if there's any window panes missing, that sort of thing. And then they would start checking the reservoirs. The Valley ship would do the same thing. and then the South Central would go down to see if LAX needs anything. Because usually what happens is that LAX and some of the other airports that are actually up and running, they'll actually shut down their runways just to have their crews go up and down the runways to make sure everything's perfect. There's nothing wrong, all the lights, everything's working. That's what I'm hearing. Everything's perfect out there, so that's a real good thing.
Well, Dave, you were around for the Northwich earthquake, and I'm sure you were in a chopper that day. What was that like? Describe to us what you saw up there.
Yeah, that was, I was working what they call graveyard then. My partner and I had landed our second flight at 4 a.m. And at 4 a.m. till 8, we're on call. That means we leave the blades untied. If we get a wind or something, the blades will flap. But you leave them untied. You leave your helmet on the seat and your gloves in the ship. And as soon as that earthquake hit, and Jeff, I heard you mention that you hadn't really experienced an LA earthquake. But let me tell you, I was born and raised in Los Angeles area, specifically Santa Fe Springs by Los Nietos. And I was downtown. I was in our building, the Piper Tech building. And when that earthquake hit, I thought, oh, another LA quake. But I'll tell you what, it wasn't. The panels started flying off, pictures were falling.
Wow.
I was so scared. I dove underneath a metal desk, not a wooden one, because I thought for sure it was going to go down. But what ended up happening is that when we took off, we did exactly what I had mentioned. My partner went ahead and reached inside. He grabbed the ADAP book. We went around and we started looking, and it had, a priority list is basically what it is.
Well, Dave, we only have a few seconds. We're on a hard break, coming up with a break here. So, the fact that I haven't felt one is, knock on wood, I think that's good luck so far.
Sure.
Because, Dave, I know that you've gone through some big ones, and we really appreciate your expertise and your experience here on KCAL 9.
And we're going to continue our coverage on KCAL 9 News at 9 with Juan Fernandez after a very short break. We'll be right back.
I hear you got a new Honda.
Yes.
Did you get a good deal on it?
Yes, I did.
Can I ask you a question? Would it be okay if we covered your first 3 payments?
This is for reals?
This is 100% for real.
Wow. I hear the commercial, but I didn't think it would ever happen to me.
Today, we help the new Honda buyer save some money. And during the Honda Summer Sales Event, we can help you too. Right now, you can get 0% APR financing on a 2021 Pilot or lease a 2021 Pilot EXL for just $309 a month plus tax.
Thousands of immigrants have now camped out, hoping to get into the country. You're watching KCAL 9 News at 9, and we're streaming on CBSN Los Angeles. I'm Juan Fernandez. Tens of thousands of people have flooded the border in recent days. Most of them fled Haiti, which is reeling from a devastating earthquake and the recent assassination of its president. One official calls the situation there unsustainable. This is going down in the border town of Del Rio, Texas, about 2.5 hours west of San Antonio. KCAL 9's Rosa Flores shows us the desperation from the ground and from above.
Sky condition clear. GPS helicopter 116 will be taking off from the north ramp.
So all of these people just crossed?
Yep.
I mean, this is hundreds of people.
Oh, it's not hundreds, it's thousands.
This stretch of the U.S. southern border is raising eyebrows.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
Nothing. This far exceeds anything we've ever seen down here.
Migrants, mostly Haitians, say officials, crossing the Rio Grande into Del Rio, Texas from Mexico.
We can see at least 3 different spots where migrants are crossing over into the United States.
Men, women, children flocking to the area under the international bridge that connects Texas to Mexico.
You can see that people are starting to wash their clothes and dry it on the fence.
Where more than 12,000 migrants are waiting to get processed by federal immigration authorities, according to the Del Rio mayor.
Eso fue bastante terrible.
This couple from Venezuela says they spent 2 days under the bridge with their 4-year-old son, sleeping in the dirt.
So en la tierra, on the dirt, you were sleeping on the dirt.
They say they're fleeing political persecution and break down crying, describing the toughest part of being under the bridge.
She's explaining that she would tell her son that the family was camping so that he didn't worry.
Border Patrol is unfortunately strained to its limit, beyond limit now.
The local mayor, a Democrat, pleading for the Biden administration to boost resources, saying that at the current rate, it will take 2 weeks to process these migrants. And signs they're having to settle in are visible from the air. A makeshift camp is going up, and the mayor says at least one woman has given birth. Most of the migrants will be expelled or placed in removal proceedings, say federal authorities, who also say more resources are coming and that it's already providing water, towels, and portable toilets. Buses like this one with dozens of people are dropped off at this migrant shelter every day.
The concern is the spread of COVID and how that affects our country.
This group is asked if they're vaccinated against COVID. About half the adults raise their hands, some holding proof they got the shots. All this as the Department of Homeland Security faces a series of challenges, including more than 200,000 migrant encounters last month, the abrupt resignation of 2 top DHS officials, the Afghan resettlement effort, and now this sudden spike of migrants in Del Rio.
These people are desperate, they're determined, and they're determined to get here.
Has a humanitarian crisis unfolding at the southern border of the United States.
That was Rosa Flores reporting. The Pentagon revealed today that a drone strike in Afghanistan meant to target ISIS-K terrorists instead hit a civilian vehicle. 10 people were killed, including an aid worker and 7 children. As Jeff Zeleny reports, the strike happened last month amid the chaotic U.S. withdrawal.
Our investigation now concludes that the strike was a tragic mistake.
Tonight, a dramatic reversal from the U.S. government, with the Pentagon conceding a drone strike last month in Kabul hit the wrong target, killing 10 civilians, including 7 children. General Kenneth McKenzie, chairman of U.S. Central Command, apologizing for the deadly misfire, striking an innocent aid worker and his family.
This strike was taken in the earnest belief that it would prevent an imminent threat to our forces and the evacuees at the airport. But it was a mistake, and I offer my sincere apology. As the combatant commander, I am fully responsible for this strike and its tragic outcome.
It was the last known missile fired by the U.S. in Afghanistan during the chaotic withdrawal of Americans and Afghan partners. Threats from ISIS-K were looming, and U.S. intelligence believed terrorists intended to use a white Toyota to attack the airport.
This was not a rushed strike. The strike cell deliberately followed and observed this vehicle and its occupants for 8 hours.
But a new Pentagon review, following an investigation by CNN and other media outlets, concluded it was a tragic mistake. An air of certainty in the days after the attack.
At this point, we think that the procedures were correctly followed and it was a righteous strike.
Now giving way to condolences, with General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, calling the deadly drone strike on civilians a horrible tragedy of war. President Biden initially hailed the drone strike as evidence the U.S. can confront threats from ISIS-K without having boots on the ground.
We've shown that capacity just in the last week. We struck ISIS-K remotely, days after they murdered 13 of our service members and dozens of innocent Afghans.
But that assessment turned out to be false, now raising questions about the drone strategy going forward and the U.S. capacity to strike ISIS-K terror targets.
That was Jeff Zeleny reporting. Law enforcement in Washington, D.C. says it's ready for tomorrow's rally in support of those charged and jailed in connection with the January 6th insurrection. Fences and high-tech cameras have gone up around the Capitol as well as other government buildings. Trump supporters stormed the Capitol earlier this year, contesting the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. The people behind tomorrow's Justice for J6 rally call those charged and in jail political prisoners.
The American public and the members of Congress have an expectation that we protect the Capitol. And I'm confident with the plan we have in place that we're going to be able to meet that expectation.
CBS News has obtained a Department of Homeland Security bulletin warning it is aware of a small number of recent online threats of violence connected to the rally. It also mentioned online discussions encouraging violence the day before the rally, but so far that hasn't happened. COVID chaos, you're seeing it right there. The hostess at a popular New York restaurant was attacked by 3 women from Texas when she asked for proof of a COVID vaccination. They repeatedly punched the 24-year-old worker at Carmine's and broke her necklace. One woman had to be dragged away from the fight. The 3 women were arrested on misdemeanor assault and given a ticket to appear in court next month. The hostess, we are told, is going to be okay physically. New York requires a vaccine for any customer who wants to dine inside. Coming up here next at 9, why California could lose hundreds of millions of dollars meant to help struggling renters. And some of the youngest people in the world to get vaccinated against COVID-19. We'll show you where this is happening.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Live look outside at Long Beach. We are looking at a mild weekend, but some hot temperatures as we head into next week. I'll have all the details coming up.
Get the CBS Los Angeles app on any device. Local news, sports, weather, video on demand, and CBS in LA, all in just one tap. Download now.
This is Megan Davies, Beachbody Super Trainer. This is MBS.
Well, we certainly had a jump start to the weekend. Isn't that right, Olga?
Yes, we
Yep.
kind of jolted into the weekend, but it's actually going to be really comfortable the next couple of days. We've already been enjoying those below average temperatures yesterday, today, and a live look outside at Santa Monica. We had better clearing at the coast today, but yes, as we head into next week, Though definitely a different pattern starts to develop. Here's a look at those temperatures outside right now. We are seeing some 50s. Look at that, mid 50s in Westlake Village. So it is a nice cool evening for some spots. 66 in Woodland Hills, plenty of 60s out through LA with 63 degrees in downtown. Compton checking in at 65, as well as Long Beach. We have some 60s, 67 degrees in Santa Ana, 66 in Irvine, and as we head into the IE, comfortable there as well. In the 70s for a lot of spots. 72 degrees up in Riverside and 59 in Big Bear City. So numbers are actually up by a few degrees. Yesterday was the coolest of the extended forecast, but not by too much. As we head into tomorrow, expect a similar pattern. And this afternoon, we topped out at 75 in downtown. So typically we see 83 this time of year. So we've been enjoying these below average numbers, and winds have decreased from where we were earlier today as well. So here's a look at our satellite radar as we head into early tomorrow. You'll see more of that cloud cover start to develop along the coastline. But by late morning and into the early afternoon hours, most of us are seeing clear skies. Here's a look at what's happening over the next few days. Low pressure still to our north, bringing us those cooler temperatures, increasing those winds. And things are going to start changing, though, as we head into the beginning of the week. It's not bringing us any rain. We're getting some of that rain up north. But for us, as we head into the work week, we start seeing high pressure building in, and that's going to start warming us up. And we're actually going to see some of those Santa Ana winds, especially by Monday. We will see some very windy conditions. And along with those winds and the warmer temperatures, of course, comes the elevated fire danger. Tomorrow, though, it's going to be very pleasant. Again, below average numbers. In the most part, we're looking at some 70s and some 80s for inland areas. Along the coast, very mild. Some beaches won't get out of the 60s. We're looking at 69 for LAX, 75 in Long Beach, and low 70s in Laguna Beach. As we take a look at the extended forecast, you will notice the temperatures start to rise as we head into the upcoming work week. And we are back in the 90s, even in the upper 90s by Wednesday for the valleys. So not expecting any extreme heat. These are actually pretty close to seasonal averages or slightly above that. But for the Inland Empire, also upper 90s by Tuesday and Wednesday. We're seeing that in the high desert as well. And we're going to keep things in the 90s all the way through the end of the work week. For the mountains tomorrow, nice and mild in the upper 60s and then climbing back into the 70s by next week. Juan, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Olga, thanks so much. Coming up next here, the ugly side of LA's garment industry. A look at the troubling conditions for some workers and what's being done to change that. And rent relief audit, why California could lose millions meant to help struggling renters. The neighborhood has been overtaken by people living in RVs. Plus, Lyft driver meltdown. See what happened when a passenger asked her to roll up the windows. And hoping to hit it big, a lot of anticipation and a lot of lottery dreaming with 2 giant jackpots up for grabs. That's all next here at 10. But now at 9, housing, rent, and evictions are serious stressors in California. And tonight, auditors are warning the state could lose hundreds of millions in federal rental assistance. KCAL9 Susie Suz here to explain this issue. Susie?
Well, Juan, thank you so much. The money was actually granted to the state during the pandemic, and because of its slow distribution, California has 2 weeks now to approve eligible households or risk losing $337 million in federal rent relief.
Very terrifying. It really is.
Christine faced losing her home after losing her job in December. Jody couldn't afford to pay the $20,000 a month rent on her dance studio while it was shuttered.
That is not sustainable for a small business owner with no income coming in.
They're among the hundreds of thousands of Californians who've lived in fear of eviction. Many who still owe back rent from the peak of the pandemic and simply can't catch up. California's emergency rental assistance program was supposed to help, but a state audit released yesterday finds the agency tasked with distributing that money is sitting on close to $1 billion worth of unprocessed applications, and the clock is ticking.
September 30th, that is the deadline.
The auditor's spokesperson, Margarita Fernandez, explains if the state doesn't obligate or commit more rent relief funds to struggling renters by the end of the month, California stands to lose more than $300 million in federal funding that may be reallocated to other states.
So there's time for them to fully pay everything out, but they have to show that those funds have been committed.
The audit also found California's Department of Housing and Community Development had $993 million worth of unprocessed applications.
What is taking so long? Why are there so many unprocessed applications?
I don't know the answer to that yet. There was changes in the law. They had to make changes to their process.
She says the auditor is currently doing a deeper dive and will issue another report, but issued this one with urgency ahead of the federal deadline, even though the Department of Housing and Community Development asked her to delay it.
We needed to issue it earlier to be able to get the message out.
And adding to the urgency, the state's eviction moratorium is also set to expire at the end of the month. And for thousands, rent relief cannot come fast enough. Well, the state's Department of Housing and Community Development pushed on the claim. In a statement to The Hill, Director Gustavo Velasquez noted that $526 million has already been distributed, which he fully expects to meet the benchmarks to keep the funding. Back to you, Juan.
All right, Susie, thanks for bringing us up to date. California's unemployment rate fell last month as kids headed back to school. It's now 7.5%. The state added more than 100,000 jobs. 45% of them were government jobs. The EDD says that's probably because public schools started again. The state lost nearly 3 million jobs at the beginning of the pandemic. On Wall Street, stocks fell to end the week's trading. Analysts say investors worry about a Federal Reserve meeting next week on inflation. The Dow gave up 166 points, the Nasdaq lost 138, and the S&P 500 closed 41 points down. Well, you may think so-called sweatshops are only found overseas, but it's happening here too, in Los Angeles. A 2016 U.S. Department of Labor investigation found pay violations in 85% of the L.A. garment shops it looked into. Anna Werner reports.
They're the clothes all over social media, garments called fast fashion. But behind the glam of many brands is a chain that leads back here to LA's old warehouses. Fashion brands often buy from a vendor, and the vendor buys from factories in warehouses like this one. Just ask Francisco Zuhl.
This is one of the places you used to work, right? Exactly.
He's spent nearly 30 years sewing garments in those factories, often called sweatshops.
I'm looking, the windows are open, so there's no AC in there, huh?
There is no AC at all.
Over the years, Zuhl has documented many problems while working in LA's garment industry, like in this video he took of cockroaches running rampant through one facility.
There is some kind of modern slavery going on the sweatshops.
Modern slavery.
Modern slavery.
In the sweatshops.
Yes. Yes.
Modern slavery, he says, because workers in those shops earn money on a system called a piece rate. They're paid for each seam they sew, each sleeve they make, each piece they complete.
They paid us like 5 cents, 6 cents for a piece.
5 cents or 6 cents a piece.
Yeah.
As a result, workers' average hourly wage last year ranged from $5.85 to as low as $2.68, according to advocacy group the Garment Workers Center. Director Marissa Nuncio.
At those low rates, they can never reach the minimum wage. It's impossible. Even the most seasoned, skilled workers cannot sew fast enough.
How fast would they have to work? To make the LA minimum wage of $15 an hour, a worker paid 5 cents per piece would have to sew 300 pieces in an hour.
Es muy difícil para mí.
It's very difficult, says this worker, Verhilda, who only wanted to be identified by her first name because she fears retaliation. She's worked in the garment shops for over 20 years, but says she still earns less than $5 an hour. If you ask for a pay raise, she told us, they say if you want to work, then work. If not, there's the door. We wanted to see the conditions for ourselves. So we went with Francisco Zul to a building where he used to work, visiting a different factory.
You are the owner?
Inside, no air conditioning, as workers sewed or trimmed stacks of inexpensive-looking clothes. We asked shop owner Valentin Carbajal.
How much would someone get paid to make that?
But the company paid me maybe around $7.50, $7.75.
So the company pays you around $7.50 for this garment?
Yeah.
Carbajal told us with brands paying so little for the garments, he can't afford to pay his workers much.
Are you saying that you can't raise their salaries because you're not getting paid enough?
This employee, Maria, told us she makes $200 a week.
So you're saying sometimes at the end of the week you don't even have the cash to pay the workers?
Yeah.
That's why last month, Francisco Zul and other garment workers rallied in California's capital to push legislation to make brand name clothing companies who control pricing, not just the subcontractors, subject to increased liability if workers aren't paid what they're owed.
We have to make the liability go to the brands.
State Senator Maria Elena Durazo sponsored the bill.
We have to make sure that they are fully responsible for what the workers who produce their garments are getting paid.
But many brands have fought the bill, saying they do follow the law and shouldn't be liable for illegal operators who don't. The California Fashion Association's Ilsa Metchek.
Let me ask you a question that should be asked of these factories. If they cannot do it legally and legitimately, why do they even take the order?
And most of the brands we contacted said they insist that workers be paid at least minimum wage. But what they say isn't enough for Francisco Zul. He wants brand names held legally responsible.
We accept whatever they have to pay us because we need the money. We need to survive. We don't have a choice. We don't have a choice.
The California Chamber of Commerce opposed this legislation, calling it a job killer. It says some employers may choose to move out of state rather than face that liability provision. Anna Werner, Los Angeles.
Coming up, they might be the youngest people in the world to get vaccinated against COVID-19. We'll show you where kids as young as 2 years old are now getting their shot. That's next at 9. And here's what we're working on for 10 o'clock.
I'm Sarah Donchie in Inglewood. One of the most closely watched trials of the past several years has finally come to a close. We'll tell you about the guilty verdict for Robert Durst coming up on KCAL 9 News.
An all-American tribute for the fallen Marine who lost his life in the Kabul airport bombing. I'm Nicole Comstock. I'll have that incredible show of support still ahead.
A popular Orange County park is shut down because of a growing number of mountain lion sightings. The story coming up.